Hello and welcome to We Learn. This is session 8 of Labor Law, Industrial Employment Standing Order Act 1946. Topics to be covered: introduction, object, scope and coverage, concept and nature of standing orders, certification process, its operation and binding effects, date of operation of standing order, registers of standing order, posting of standing order, duration and modifications of standing orders, payment of substance allowance, power of certifying the officers and appellant authorities, oral evidence in contradictions of a standing order not admissible, temporary applications of model standing order, penalties and procedures, interpretations of standing order, power to make a rule, the schedule of the act. Introduction. The lack of a rule for securing the permanencies of a job, fair deal, disciplinary actions, or a petty matter wasn't a worry problem to the industrial workers. Provisions of the effective safeguard against the unjust and work dismissals and other disciplinary actions become a need of a time. We can say that yes, just to providing a safeguard, जब एक किसी भी तरीके की dismiss या जब भी किसी भी तरीके की रॉन्ग सिचुएशंस या अनजस्टिस और रॉन्ग डिसमिस क्रिएट होती है, उस केस में वी रिक्वायर्ड स्टैंडिंग ऑर्डर एज एन act. In terms of, we can say that the standing order is basically generating or we can say that the Labor Investigation Commission states that an individual worker has a right to know the terms and conditions under which he is employed and rule of discipline which he is expected to follow. In terms of, उन्हें पता होना चाहिए कि किस तरीके के रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस या किस तरीके की टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस एक एम्प्लॉइज एक्चुअली फॉलो करेंगे जब वो किसी भी तरीके की वर्किंग कंडीशंस में आते हैं या जब वो किसी भी तरीके की वर्किंग सिनेरियोज में होते हैं. सो दे हैव अ राइट टू नो ऑल दिस. Now, what is the object to be considered in that? The act is designed to avoid the frictions and tensions amongst the employers and workmen employed in an organization. So, the basic concept or the basic object of this kind of an act is just to bringing out the minimum frustrations and tensions amongst both the party, whether they were employers and employees in both the side. In terms of in the employer's condition, yes, we can consider the how many employees are required, how many going to be go out from the organization. These are questions which actually going to be asked. But yes, in the terms of the workmen, they was generating these kind of as acts help in generating the securities in the job. The tri-party labor conference pledged for the defining the condition of the employment so as to create a harmonious relationship between the employers and workmen. So this is what it is, the kind of labor commission was take the kind of responsibility that this act is basically conducted just to create the harmonious relationship between employers and employees. Employer and employees के बीच में एक सही relationship create करने के लिए और वो बने रहने के लिए इस एक्ट को बनाया गया है. बिफोर दिस एक्ट विक्टिमाइजेशन एंड अनफेयर लेबर प्रैक्टिसेस वाज क्वाइट फ्रीक्वेंट. इन टर्म्स ऑफ यस, इससे पहले बहुत सारी लेबर्स unfair practices or unlegal practices होती थी, which is not allowed. That being in a labor, you have to consider labor as a human and try to use their skills according to that. So this is what the main object of arising this kind of a concept. Next is scope and coverage. This is basically establishing and discussing about that what kind of scope and coverage would be discussed in the following act. So establishment coverage is, or we can say that establishment covered. So this act is basically applying to the every industrial establishment wherein 100 or more workmen are employed or with the employed one on any day of preceding the 12 months. In terms of हम किसी भी टाइम किसी भी समय किसी भी तरीके के एम्प्लॉइज को हायर कर सकते हैं. Another is the industrial establishment. Industrial establishment is basically to industrial or to defining the industry concept, what kind of an employment was there in the industry concept. So this is what basically stating that the term where services or the motor transportation services engaged in carrying the passenger goods and services by a road for a fire endeavor. In terms of this is what the kind of a situation which is actually being arised in it in these scenarios. As we come to know in that industrial establishment that yes it is what basically motor transportation जैसी services में use होता है जिस तरीके के act air transportation services में use होते हैं and yes at the same time the vessel industry was there, mining and quarrying industry were there, plantations, work jobs and other establishments organization would be there. So this is what basically the industrial establishment कि किस तरीके से या कहाँ पर ये act को follow किया जाता है. Another is exempted excluded the act is basically applying that applicable that an industry is basically considering those factors which actually provisions of the other countries or other states of the organization. Another is extended establishment. This is what the act shall not be applicable to the industrial establishment in so as far as the workmen employed therein are the persons the fundamental and supplementary rules in civil services was actually provided or actually discusses. Another is the government power to exempt, then appropriate government, then employees under the act. The concept and nature of standing order. What exactly the standing order is? Standing order is basically the industry's employment. We can say that it is kind of a rule relating to the matter set out the schedule. The item which has been covered by standing order in respect of which the employees has been have to make a draft for submitting of the clarifying officer are matter specified in the schedule. That is what the kind of a meeting, or we can say that the kind of discussions or committee orders which were actually created by the heads of the organization, they actually going to decide about the company's remuneration. Another is the content of schedule. Content of schedule, that means what kind of a schedule you are basically offering in the session. And then another is applying for nature of the standing order. Nature of the standing order is basically what kind of a nature are they in, किस तरीके की natures में है. So the term of employment specific is the standard order would privilege the order and componenting the terms in the contract of service. This existence with the time of the enforcement of the standing order. In terms of this is what the kind of generating the factors and considering the generating of the sales factor in that particular field area. Then other is the next is certification process. It's an operation and a binding effect. In terms of yes, this is the kind of a process that means they were actually looking for the what kind of a certificate to be issued in the operations binding effects. सबसे पहला objective which can be issued is submission of a draft standing order by the employees. It is what the submission. Another next is the condition of the certificate or standing order. That means you have to define the condition and the standing orders. Another is the matter to be set out in the schedule, when the matter and when the issues actually come out in the schedule. Then another is matter not covered by schedule. It is what all these matters which are not covered by the another areas. Then the next is conformity with the model standing order in terms of what providing the conformities part and conformities about the product. Another is fairness and reasonable of standing order. That means just to bringing out the proper reasonable and fairness for the organization. That is what the fairness and the readiness of share ordering. This is the procedures for certification of the standing order. That means bringing out एक standing order का certification लेने के लिए क्या basic procedure होता है. So we can say that in that the draft standing order are submitted. एक draft standing order जो है वो submit करवाया जाता है and this could be submitted to the trade union और उसको issue करने वाले होते हैं the certifying officers जो कि उसकी एक copy जो है yes एक trade union को देते हैं. At the same time, if there is any absence of the workman concerned to the file of objection. So it is respective of the draft standing order within the 15 days of a receipt of notice. अगर किसी भी तरीके की objection rise होती है तो उसे 15 days के अंदर solve out कर दिया जाएगा. Another is satisfying officers. Certifying officers की appointment, उनकी powers and उनकी duties. If we talk about the certifying officers under the this act particularly, so in that case, yes, they were appointed by the appropriate government of that particular act. And by this appropriate government, they were actually comes and gives the certain kind of powers. इन्हें कुछ powers issue की जाती हैं. वो power हो सकती है that is what receiving the evidence, enforcing the attendance of the witnesses, compelling the discoveries and the productions of the documents. So this is what the main powers of the certifying officers. Again, the appeal against the certification. Appeal against the certification is the same when the employer or the workman, employees या workman में से कोई भी अगर certifications के oppose होता है, so in that case they may appeal that they have an authority to appeal that by the appropriate government to the respective areas. So that is the appeal of certification. Now the next is date of operations of standing orders. Standing orders की क्या date of operations होते हैं? In terms of, we can say that yes, section 7 basically state that standing orders shall, unless an appeal is preferred under the section 6, अगर किसी भी तरीके की अपील जो है सेक्शन 6 के अंदर अप्रूव नहीं होती है, comes into the operations on the expiry of the 30 days from the date on which, आपने अगर किसी तरीके की अपील की है and it was waited for the 30 days and it's expired now, so it could be a date of operation can be further discussed about. So in that case, authoritative copy thereof are sent under the subsections of 3 of the section 5, wherein an appeal as an aforesaid is preferred on the expiry of the 7 days from the date on which the copies of order of the appellate authority are basically sent. So this is what, जहाँ पर आप जब आपकी एक respective एरिया जो होते हैं, आप ये कह सकते हैं कि आपने जिस पर्टिकुलर मैटर पर अपील की है वो अगर रिजेक्ट हो जाती है, उस पर किसी तरीके के रिस्पॉन्स नहीं आते, सो पर्सन हैव इन 30 days. आफ्टर वेटिंग फॉर द 30 days, दैट पर्सन कैन आस्क फॉर द और कैन गो फॉर द अनदर लेवल ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर अथॉरिटी. Date of operation of the standing order. That is what in a standing order become mandatory provision thereafter must be followed if in the industrial disputes arises. अगर किसी भी तरीके का industrial disputes arise होता है, so in that case, yes, it's become a mandatory to come with the concept of the standing order. Then registered of the standing orders. Registered of standing order, that means yes. You have to register, and we can say that in section 8 of the act they were basically providing that a copy of all the standing orders as finally certified under this act. जितने भी act हैं उनकी एक copy जो होती है वो यहाँ पर certified होती हैं, and it could be, we can say that prescribing from maintained for the purposes and certifying the officers shall furnish a copy thereafter to the person applying there for the payment of perceived fee, in terms of when the person is actually wants to verify it, wants to register it, तो उस केस के अंदर रजिस्टर के अंदर they have to maintain the purpose. उन्हें purpose बताना पड़ेगा that why they were actually looking for these standing orders, and yes, at the same time they have to furnish all the formalities related to that particular task. Then posting of the standing orders. Standing orders की posting क्या होती है? Posting in terms of the area section 9 of the act basically requires that the text of the standing order as finally certified in accordance with the provision of this act. जब एक आपका जो standing order है वो finally certified हो जाता है, so this act be permanently posted by the employer in English, and yes, at the same time that certification or that the provision should be sent to the person or the employer and in the language understood by the majority of his workmen. जो भी लैंग्वेज जो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ लोगों को समझ में आती है उस लैंग्वेज में और इंग्लिश के अंदर उसे इशू कर दिया जाता है. आफ्टर दैट, yes, at the same time it is basically used to maintain it is used to maintain that particular majority of his workmen on the special order board to be maintained for the purpose at or near the entrance through which the majorities of the workmen enter the industrial establishment, and yes, in all the department thereof where the workmen are employed. In terms of it was taking care of all the purposes at or near the entrance through which the majority of workmen was there. ड्यूरेशन मॉडिफिकेशन ऑफ स्टैंडिंग ऑर्डर की किस तरीके से मॉडिफिकेशंस हो सकती हैं, क्या उनकी पर्टिकुलर ड्यूरेशन होती है. व्हेन यू से दैट, सो यस, इट इज़ व्हेन द स्टैंडिंग ऑर्डर बी मॉडिफाइड, इट इज़ व्हाट अंडर दिस एक्ट modification until the expiry of 6 months from the date of which the standing order or the last modification thereof comes into the operation unless the agreement provides otherwise. In terms of आप तब तक इसके अंदर किसी भी तरीके की मॉडिफिकेशंस नहीं करवा सकते हैं जब तक इसके 6 मंथ्स पूरे ना हो. इन टर्म्स ऑफ जिस दिन आपको स्टैंडिंग ऑर्डर इशू हुआ था या आपकी जो फर्स्ट या सेकंड आपकी जो भी मॉडिफिकेशन होती है स्टैंडिंग ऑर्डर में, उन दोनों टाइम्स के बीच में कम से कम 6 मंथ्स का गैप होना चाहिए. देन हु मे अपील फॉर द मॉडिफिकेशन, दैट मीन्स व्हाट who are the persons who ask for that certain kind of modifications. yes ना, employer और workman may apply for that. employer और worker दोनों ही apply कर सकते हैं certain modification के लिए, and such application must be accompanied by the 5 copies of modification proposed to be made. in terms of कि आप जो भी किसी तरीके की changes करना चाहते हैं या आप किसी भी तरीके की modifications करना चाहते हैं, this will lead towards the further 5 copies will be required for that, duplicate copies. The next is the payment of substance allowances. It is what we can say that it is in the sections 10A where any workman is suspended by the employers pretending the investigations or inquiries into the complaint or charges of the misconduct against him. The employer shall pay off on such workman substantial allowances. In that terms, एक एम्प्लॉय अगर किसी भी तरीके की मिसकंडक्ट में या किसी भी तरीके के पेंडिंग काम्स में ये सब कंडक्ट करता है या इनके बारे में पता लगता है, सो इन दैट केस उसके जो अलाउंसेस हैं वो डिडक्ट कर दिए जाते हैं या दे कांट बी kept it. So in that terms, that is all the same written in it that the employer shall pay to such workmen. उस केस में एम्प्लॉयर जो है उन सारे वर्कमेंस को बताएगा अबाउट दैट पर्टिकुलर अलाउंसेस. सो इफ एनी डिस्प्यूट अराइजेज रिगार्डिंग द सब्सटेंस अलाउंसेस payable to the workmen under these subsections. So the first is the employers or the employee concerned may refer to the disputes to the labor and labor code and construct with the industrial dispute. Another is the section 11, which is discussing about the power of the certifying officers and the appellant authorities. We can say that yes, the every certifying officer and the appellant authority shall have all the powers of the civil code. जितनी भी civil code की powers होती हैं वो सारी उनकी powers होती हैं, and there were like few changes in terms of the following personnel following deemed to civil codes, and within it the meaning of sections 480 and 482 of the code of the criminal procedure, and this could include that the receiving evidence, and another is receiving administration was owed for that, enforcing the attendance of the witness, compelling the discoveries and the production of the documents. Then oral evidence in conducting of standing orders. In terms of under section 12, no oral evidence would be provided, and yes, at the same time, if the person is looking for to ask for any kind of an inquiry, and this would be required to get in a proper way to approach it. So in that case, yes, rather than it going towards or getting the evidence for the particular government, it is what to give or the particular areas inspect controllers. So it is important to generate the factories or generating the industrial concept that what kind of an oral evidence was issued, but otherwise oral evidence are not issued. And then the temporary applications of the model standing orders, that is what kind of an temporary basis using of that prospectus would be there. Section 112A 12A of the Act containing the following provisions in respect to the temporary applications of the non-standing order. जिसमें सबसे पहले पहला concept है temporary application का, that is notwithstanding anything, concentration, and yes, we can say that it is what the notwithstanding anything contained in section 3 to 12 for the period concerning the date on which this act becomes applicable to the industry. They basically establish an encoding with the date on which the standing order as in a family certified under this act comes into the operations. So this is what the kind of areas we can say that kind of period in terms the maximum the target audience was with you, and yes, at the same time you can approach that target audience with the respective services. So that is what the temporary applications model standing order. Then other is, however, the afford provisions shall not apply to an industrial establishment is in the relations of which the appropriate government is the government of the state. So that is what the temporary applications. Then parties and procedures involved. When it comes to parties and procedures, so yes, an employer who failed to submit the draft standing order as required on the section 3, or who modified his standing orders otherwise than it in the accordance of section 10 shall be punishable with the fine may extended or 5 may extended to the 5,000 rupees. In terms of yes, अगर किसी भी तरीके का एक employer जो है it is failed to get the or to understand the standing order and the requirement of it, so then that person is actually liable to generate the benefit. Then next is an employer who does any act in the contraventions of the standing order finally certified under this act of the authorities, or we can say that it is which may extend to the 1,000 rupees, and yes, at the same time no proceeding of the offensive punishment under the services shall be required, or shall it is what the institution expected with the price. Now, interpretations of the sharing orders in terms of how we were actually going to interpret it. So yes, that is the same section 13A. So in that terms, the first is section 13A deals with the procedures to be followed in the case of the government social standing orders arises. It would provide that if it's not, so in that case it is dissatisfaction, it provides that it working on that means they were working on the values and try to generate the loyalty factor. In that case, yes, any employer or a workman or a trade person or other representative bodies of the workmen may refer to representations and the quality of the Indian career. The questions would be arises, and yes, again the labor code was arises, and this would further help to understand the leads of that particular or we can say that to analyze the for particular questions regarding the schedule. Another is yes, power to make a rule. किस तरीके के rules जो हैं वो बनाए जा सकते हैं. So section 15(1) of the act basically re-empowers the appropriate government to make the rules to carry out the process of the act after the ऑफिशियल गजेटेड, यानी कि जब ऑफिशियल गजेटेड जब किसी तरीके के रूल्स बनाता है तो उसको आगे तक पास करने का काम भी फैसिलिटेटर का ही होता है. एंड देन सेक्शन 15(2) इट्स बेसिकली प्रोवाइडेड दैट पर्टिकुलर टू एंड विदाउट प्रेडिक्शंस ऑफ द जनरलिटी ऑफ द अथॉरिटी वुड बी देयर. देन दिस इज व्हाट द काइंड ऑफ particulars without authority. Then next is the schedules to the act. What kind of a schedule would be there? So matters to be provided in the standing order and the act. The considerations of the workers. Considerations we can say that जितने भी workmen होते हैं, we have to consider that, we have to understand that yes, at the same time it is required to classifying of the workers. That means to working or to briefing about the workmen, what kind of work they were looking for, holidays, pay days, leave days, wages, rate, etc. Shift warehousing is what, and the late or attendance and the late coming is what comes into the PPE. And another is attendance in the late coming and conditions of the procedures and applying and the authorities which may get the band and holidays. Then termination enters the premises by sending the gate and the liability to the search. So in that terms, yes, the terminations of the employees and the notice thereof to be given by the employers and workmen. So in that term, it is what the suspensions are discovering or we can say that controlling the misconduct and the omissions which is in the organization, which could be committed but after that not committed. The meaning of a stress reduction, it is what for workmen against the unfair treatment or wrongful expectancies by the employers or the agent would be there. Then yes, there are a few questions which you have to do it yourself. सबसे पहला है what are the objective of standing order, and another is explain the concept and the nature of the standing order. So yes, this is all about for the today's session. We are winding up here. Thank you so much. Happy learning, everyone.